But look, this is a problem we're facing all across the country. This is a problem we're facing right now in the House of Representatives with our brand new speaker, Mike Johnson, who is a nut sack, radical evangelical Christian who believes that the earth is like 8,000 years old or some fucking nonsense. We are not moving into a direction that we want to be moving. We're moving backward. If you think it was bad with Kevin McCarthy and the way he believes, being an election denier, being a lapdog, sycophantic ass kisser of Donald Trump, Mike Johnson is even worse.
Yes, and we are going to do a bit of a deep dive right now on who Mike Johnson is. So let's just start with the fact that he is a Republican representative from Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And not a lot was known about him before he actually became speaker. And that was one of the benefits, I guess you could say, of electing him, because the Republicans could not decide who were we going to put up. We can't get enough votes to get Steve Scalise. We can't get enough votes to get Jim Jordan. We can't get enough votes to get Kevin McCarthy back in there.
Because too many people knew too much about them.
Yes.
Mike Johnson's like this unknown quantity, but now that we're knowing about him, we're learning about him. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah, I think Susan Collins was asked like before the vote, or I don't know, something about him.
Yeah, do you think you can work with him on the budget?
Yeah, and she's like, I'm going to Google him later. Not a great sign.
Susan Collins.
Not a great sign, but let's just kind of review who he is. So he's a close ally of Donald Trump. Yep. He is anti-abortion. He is anti-LGBTQ. We're going to get into that. He has horrible, disgusting views.
Virulently anti-gay, anti-trans, just sickening.
Yeah, he voted against Ukraine aid, but he also, and this one's important, he opposed the certifying of the 2020 election. So you remember when the moderates, quote unquote moderates, were not
hard air quotes on that.
Were not able to support Jim Jordan publicly in their vote for speaker because he's so radical. Well, I don't know why somehow it changed and they're able to support Mike Johnson because he opposed certifying the 2020 election. He tweeted on November 7th, 2020, I have just called President Trump to say this. Stay strong in your caucus. No. Stay strong and keep fighting, sir. The nation is depending upon your resolve. We must exhaust every available legal remedy to restore Americans' trust in the fairness of our election system. So he's into it. He's on board.
He joined in the lawsuit. In fact, I believe he was an intellectual architect of one of the lawsuits that was challenging the results of the 2020 election. He wasn't just I support Trump. He was involved in the attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 election.
You are correct, Jesse D., because according to reporting from the Washington Post, he led a group of 126 Republican lawmakers in filing an amicus brief to the Supreme Court, alleging that authorities in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan had usurped the constitutional authority of state legislatures when they loosened voting restrictions because of the pandemic. The court rejected the underlying complaint, blah, blah, blah.
And by the way, since then, the Supreme Court has done some work to reject the claim that state legislatures can just out of hand reject the will of the people.
Yeah. So when it came out that Mike Johnson was going to be the guy, Republicans were putting him forward. They were taking it to the floor of the House. They were going to vote. There was a press conference held prior to the vote, and reporters did their best to try to get at who he is, including asking him about his efforts to overturn the election results. And this was the response from Republicans.
Mr. Johnson, you helped lead the efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Will you
Next question. Next question.
Now let me paint a picture for you. If you're not watching this on YouTube, if you're not watching this on video, you don't know who the cast of characters that were around Mike Johnson. First of all, to his left, on screen right, directly there was Lauren Boebert. It tells you who he is surrounding himself with. Right behind him, over his right shoulder, screen left, was Steve Scalise, cackling with glee while a reporter is being told to shut her mouth, being told to shut up, asking about his attempts to subvert American democracy. The woman you heard scream, "Shut up," was Virginia Woolf, a congresswoman, and a radical. This is just an abject disrespect of the First Amendment. Everybody thinks the First Amendment is just freedom of speech, but freedom of the press, to have a press that can operate unfettered to get to the truth for the American people, is a fundamental concept within the First Amendment that Republicans who scream about free speech all the time just don't give a shit about.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into some of his inconsistent religious beliefs, but I do think it's funny that once he was elected Speaker of the House, he got up and talked about how he believes, his faith calls him to believe, that God chooses its leaders and elevates people to certain positions of power. And I guess he believes that in like his elections,
right?
But he doesn't believe that in other elections where it might involve someone named President Joe Biden.
Yeah,
I guess that's where there's a limit to God choosing the leader. But let's get into some of Mike Johnson's values, some of his comments that he's made, because he's not well known, and we want to make sure that you know who he is, that you know who every single Republican in the House voted for, even the ones who call themselves moderate. This is their guy. This is their guy. A guy who says that we should really hearken back to the 18th century for our values.
Oh, you bigot. Can't you be a little more open-minded? Come on. That's so like 18th century, Well, they told us that if we didn't maintain those 18th century values, that the Republic would not stand. And so this is the condition we find ourselves in today.
What exactly are the 18th century values you're talking about, Mike Johnson? Is it slavery? Is it women not having the right to vote? Is it only white landowners having political power in this country? Are those the 18th century values you're talking about? This is the way of the Republican when they talk this way. When people like Michael Knowles or Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro or any host of idiot conservative runs their mouths, they're very vague about what 18th century, what 1700s values it is that they're talking about. Because as far as I'm concerned, the world is a lot better place. Our values are more defined and secure and protective of marginalized groups than they were when rich white men were in control.
Yeah, and I mean, this gets to the heart of his inconsistent views, where there's just not a lot of clarity because, he went on Sean Hannity after he got the speaker position, and he said, if you want to know about my views, if you want to know about what I believe, just pick up a Bible. And it's like, okay, even within that book, there's a lot of very contradicting ideas and themes. So, I mean, that it really tells me nothing about what you believe and what your values actually are.
Does that mean your values are, if a man encounters a virgin who has not been pledged to be married and he rapes her, he should pay the father of the rape victim 50 shekels of silver, and then he must marry the rape victim? Meaning the rape victim must marry her attacker. Just open up a Bible. You'll find out exactly what I believe. Is that what you're talking about, Mike Johnson?
Something tells me maybe, actually, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know.
He would probably say, oh, no, not that. This other stuff over here, but not that thing.
Yeah.
He's just very unclear.
Classic cafeteria style. We get it. So Mike Johnson also, like we said, anti-abortion, and he's actually made some strange comments regarding the overturning of Roe v. Wade. This is a clip from a House Judiciary Committee hearing where he talked about Roe v. Wade giving constitutional cover and somehow made an argument that, like, if you allow abortions, then there's going to be fewer workers in the economy.
Roe v. Wade gave constitutional cover to the elective killing of unborn children in America, period. You think about the implications of that on the economy. We're all struggling here to cover the bases of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest. If we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this. Listen,
the gentleman.
I will not yield. I will not. Roe was a terrible corruption of America's constitutional jurisprudence.
I love this. I love that the main concern is like, what about these babies that we can put to work? What about their labor? We're missing out on all this labor. Forgetting, of course, that people who are forced to have babies against their will are going to be inevitably taken out of the workforce for a period of time. Given the lack of child care services and support that we have in this country, there are people that, if they have a child, are going to be taken out of the workforce because they can't afford child care. They can't access child care. And you'd think that he would care about those babies that are here and struggling right now, or even the ones that haven't been born yet that are going to be struggling. But no, he just sees it as, why are you killing the workers? Yeah,
it is a bizarre thing that Republicans who act like they have a stranglehold on economics and the workforce and how things work, they completely ignore the fact of what the financial outcomes are generally for people who wait to have children. People who have children early on don't do as well financially over the long haul. And if you don't do as well financially, you become more of a draw on the system. And if you do well or better financially, you generate tax revenue. So he wants to act like he's got a stranglehold on this, but really all it is a religious adherence to his particular interpretation of his particular flavor of religion, and it doesn't serve what facts are. Again, believing that dinosaurs and humans lived together on the planet, it's ahistorical, to say the least.
Yeah. So what's one of your favorite sayings, Jesse, when you say that we live...
Fuck straight off.
Okay. What's another one of your favorite sayings? When you say that we live in a democracy and people respond to that, what's your favorite saying that they respond? We don't live in a democracy.
Oh, we live in a constitutional republic.
Okay, get ready, because Mike Johnson has a spin on that.
Oh.
Yes, he doesn't believe that we live in a democracy, but he believes we live in a biblical republic.
We don't live in a democracy, because a democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what's for dinner, okay? It's not just majority rule. It's a constitutional republic. And the founders set that up because they followed the biblical admonition on what a civil society is supposed to look like.
See, this is straight out of the teachings of a guy named David Barton, who is and I'm seriously going to break my fucking fingers doing air quotes here, a constitutional scholar. This is a guy who believes that the Bible was literally used as a template for our Constitution, that the Constitution wove into the fabric of our country and our laws structures from Deuteronomy, and it's all just a wild stretch that has no basis. If you listen, we know, because we have the Federalist Papers, we have all of the notes and the inner workings of what went on and what the arguments were when the Constitution was being formulated, and it was not based on the Bible. It is just a fabrication. Again, strangely enough, radical right-wing evangelicals aren't adherent. They don't have any adherence to the truth. They're just liars.
Well, and like other Christian nationalists, he doesn't actually believe that there's a separation of church and state.
Right.
And what's interesting is he's an attorney, and he will use his training as an attorney, his education as an attorney, to make this argument.
What's happened, Alex, over the last 60, 70 years is that our generation has been convinced that there's a separation of church and state, right? We heard that term all the time. And most people think that that's part of the Constitution, but it's not. Remember, I'm a constitutional lawyer.
He's a constitutional lawyer.
Yeah, you don't need... Just being a lawyer doesn't qualify you to make spurless, inaccurate statements about the founding and about our history. Thomas Jefferson, who was involved in all of this, he wrote a letter to the Danbury Baptists, and it was a group of people who were, the way I understand it, upset about the separation of church and state. And Jefferson explained it very well, that to whom are we going to give the power? Which group, which flavor of Christianity are we going to have run the country? And because no one wants to give up that power, no one gets it. You don't want Mike Johnson wouldn't want Muslims being in control,
or atheists,
right? Or atheists, or any other flavor other than his own. And because of that, it should be a harbinger of doom that we would allow the intertwining, the non-separation, the integration of church and state. It is nonsense, and it is the standard operating procedure, pattern and practice of white Christian nationalists to want their particular version to be the one that rules us all.
Has he heard of the Establishment Clause? I mean, as a constitutional lawyer.
You would think.
Just curious.
It sounds like he does, and it doesn't. I'm saying that as a joke. He absolutely does want his particular interpretation of the Bible, the one of thousands of different interpretations, to oppress the groups he hates and to lift up the groups that he is a part of.
Yes. Well, and that is a good segue, Jesse, because we are now going to transition to his hateful anti-gay comments. And we're going to play 2 clips on this. They are both from CNN, where CNN's K-File, Andrew Kaczynski, dug up some anti-gay comments that Mike Johnson has made over the course of his career. And we'll start here.
It's time for an honest conversation about homosexuality. There's freedom to change if you want to.
CNN K-File, Andrew Kaczynski is out front. So, Andrew, that's, pretty unambiguous. But what else did you find?
Yeah, so for years, Johnson worked with this group called Exodus International on an anti-gay event aimed at teens. Now, Exodus was a leader in what was called the ex-gay movement. We talked a little bit about it in that intro, where they claimed that you could essentially change somebody's sexuality through counseling, through prayer. They basically treated being gay as a mental illness. Now, Johnson and this group, when he was an attorney at this socially conservative organization called the Alliance Defense Fund, collaborated on this event called the Day of Truth. And this was actually in response to a pro-gay event called the Day of Silence. It was to raise awareness about bullying for gay teens. And then they launched this event the next day in 2005. That was about, basically, they'd pass out cards. They would tell people that you could change your sexual behavior. They pointed teens to their website, and this had links to Exodus's ministries. And we actually have some audio of Johnson talking about that event. Let's take a listen to it.
Our race, the size of our feet, the color of our eyes, these are things we're born with and we cannot change. But what these adult advocacy groups like the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network are promoting is a type of behavior. Homosexual behavior is something you do. It's not something that you are.
And I think we should note, too, that Exodus actually shut down in 2013. Their founder issued a long apology apologizing for the hurt and pain that this sort of thing has caused. And we actually spoke to a former executive when we were working on this story, and he said that this sort of thing was very damaging for gay teens.
So what else did you find on Johnson's record on gay rights?
So homosexuality was it was a topic he talked about a lot. When that Lawrence v. Texas ruling came down in 2003, which threw out state sodomy laws, Johnson actually wrote to say that he thought those laws should have stayed in place. He called homosexuality, we reported last week, inherently unnatural. He called it a dangerous lifestyle. He was very against same-sex marriage, and he actually said it was going to bring down democracy, and then he said people would be marrying their pets, like goldfish, cats, things like that.
Marrying a goldfish. He thinks people are... So...
Fucking idiot.
Dear God. So in 2004, he also wrote a column saying that polygamists, polyamorous, and pedophiles will be next in line to claim equal protection after gay marriage. And whenever I read something like this, I'm just like, that was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Is he going to come out and say, hey, you remember that thing I wrote 20 years ago where I made this prediction about how pedophiles were next in line?
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm super wrong about things because I have a terrible worldview. No, we're never going to hear them apologize and admit they were wrong, even though they are wrong. And, as a part of this, I want to talk about their fundamental view. Mike Johnson's fundamental view is that homosexuality is wrong, that it can be changed through conversion therapy, which is not true.
Anti-science.
And it's actually very damaging and harmful and should not be practiced. And
in many states is illegal to practice. In many states.
His wife actually runs a counseling service that compares being gay to incest and bestiality. And Huffington Post uncovered this. Her name is Kelly Johnson. On the website, the counseling service is called Onward Christian Counseling Services. And they talk about that their counseling services are grounded in the belief that sex is offensive to God if it is not between a man and a woman married to each other. It puts being gay, bisexual, or transgender in the same category as someone who has sex with animals or family members, calling all of these examples of sexual immorality. Now, what's interesting about this is the very next day that this was published in Huffington Post, they took down this website.
Oh, so they're not super proud of it.
I mean, it seems like they're not.
How strange that they would take down this thing that is in alignment with God. Why would they be ashamed of it? Why would they be afraid of it? Why would they run away from it if it is the word and belief of God, the almighty creator of everything seen and unseen?
Right. And why wouldn't they respond to a request for comment, which the Huffington Post requested from them, and there was no response. So obviously he's uncomfortable with how everyone is digging up these previous statements so that everyone can see exactly who he really is. So continuing with K-File and Andrew Kaczynski's research here, I want to play, there's this meme online right now where, I don't know, they're talking about how like men can't stop talking about the fall of the Roman Empire or something.
Yeah,
Have
I've
you been
seen
seeing
that.
this?
Yeah, I've seen it.
And I guess
like girlfriends or wives ask their husbands, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And a lot of these ding-dongs are like, at least once a day.
Yeah.
Several times a day I think about the Roman Empire.
Yeah, and I guess Mike Johnson is right up there too, but like he can't help but think about gay sex.
Many historians, those who are objective, would look back and recognize and give some credit to the fall of Rome to not only the deprivation of the society and the loss of morals, but also to the rampant, homosexual behavior that was condoned by the society.
Me think he doth protest too much. Maybe he's a little too against and obsessed with the gay sex element here.
Yeah, I mean, when you start like tracing everything to gay sex, it starts to get a little like you're thinking about it a lot.
We shouldn't be surprised if he can make a justification for anti-abortion laws because there's not enough workers. It makes a little bit of sense. Here's the thing that always has struck me about these people is that these are Republicans. These are people who have a libertarian strain running through their beliefs that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness should be at the forefront and the tips of all of our tongues, that if you're not hurting anyone else, you should be able to do what you want to do. Be your own person. Be the master of your domain, unless it happens to misalign with my particular mythology. Then we got a problem. Oh, it doesn't hurt me. It doesn't have anything to do with me. You're living your life. You're happy. You're productive. You're not harming anyone. Sorry, that's not good enough. You need to live the way I believe you should live, or you're a pariah and you're an evil doer and a sinful, fucker of goldfish, apparently.
Yeah, so we want to touch on 3 more things with Mike Johnson. Number 1, there's some controversy over whether or not he has this adopted black son that he has talked about in the past, but doesn't really talk about anymore. And then there's like no public photos of the son.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of speculation online about like what's going on here because he's talked about having a black son. Specifically when he like wants to be publicly against reparations and be like, well, I talked to my black son and he says that he's not for it. So
it's like the next level. It's like leveling up from, well, I've got a lot of black friends. I'm okay. I'm one of the good ones because I have black friends. This just levels him up that he's adopted a black kid, so I can't be racist.
Yeah, so again, after his election to Speaker of the House, there's a lot of questions about it. His office was reached for a comment by Vanity Fair, and his communications director, Corinne Day, gave a statement saying that before he ran for Congress in 2016, or I guess the year he first ran for Congress in 2016, he and his wife spoke to their son, Michael. This is the black son, Michael, who apparently didn't want to be in their new public life. Like he didn't want to be involved in the public spectacle of him running.
How convenient.
But that they maintain a close relationship with Michael to this day. They were also asked if they formally adopted Michael, because apparently he was 14 at the time. And
I think Mike Johnson was 25.
And they said because of the lengthy process, they did not formally adopt him.
Oh, so he doesn't have a black son. He didn't adopt a black son. It was all for political points and posturing to be able to be as racist as he needs to be.
Gotcha.
Fantastic. Good to go, Mike Johnson. Woo! We got you.
The communications director also declined to say whether Michael used the same surname as the family. But they say they have a close relationship today.
So why don't you just say you have a black friend? You don't have to say you adopted the guy who's your black friend, Mike Johnson.
So new reporting also came out from the Daily Beast about his finances.
Oh, I have heard this, and this is hilarious.
This is from Roger Sollenberger, who's a great reporter. Definitely follow him wherever you can. He's a fantastic reporter for the Daily Beast. And he found that Mike Johnson does not have a bank account. And because as a member of Congress, you need to fill out your personal financial disclosures.
For ethics reasons.
Mike Johnson has filled those out, and they date back to 2016. And over the course of 7 years, he's never reported a checking account, savings account, nor those accounts for his wife or his children.
You have to report for your spouse, for your immediate family. You have to report income and assets.
Yes. And so in this article, basically what the thesis is that it's unlikely that he doesn't have a bank account, is what Roger Sollenberger says, but that he lives paycheck to paycheck. Because I think you would need to report it if it has over $1,000 in the account.
Yeah.
And so the logic here being that he's
either lying about what the amounts are in accounts, or he doesn't have any money, which, listen, this isn't an indictment of living paycheck to paycheck. Millions, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people live paycheck to paycheck in this country. The problem is you want this guy to be in charge of appropriations and budgeting and responsible fiscal activity when he is a rich guy. He's making $190,000 a year, now more than that, being Speaker of the House, and he's living paycheck to paycheck. That is a red flag to me.
Yeah, well, and so, like you're saying, the reason that you report these financial documents and inform the public of what your financial situation is so if you are in financial trouble, it kind of signals that you could be vulnerable to influence buying.
Sure.
And, so maybe he's vulnerable to some of that. We don't know.
Yeah, listen, you can't even get a security clearance if you have terrible enough credit. It does make you susceptible to influence, because if you're just dirt broke and don't know what you're doing, when you make this kind of money, and look, it is different with someone like Maxwell Frost, who had not good enough credit to get into an apartment, who's brand new in Congress. This is a guy who's been in Congress for 7 years now. He has an established family. He's been like a radio host. He's had several professional jobs. He's a constitutional lawyer. You would think he would have the wherewithal to be able to scratch together a few dollars to have at least a savings account, right? A retirement account, which he also has not reported. This is a problem, without a doubt, for the guy who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, second in line to the president, first in line to the president, behind the Vice President of the United States. It's a problem.
Well, and on that note, so Mike Johnson is planning to cut roughly $14 billion from funds that were allocated to the IRS in order to get some aid to Israel. And the Congressional Budget Office.
That's right.
Recently,
CBO.
Said that this is actually going to increase the deficit by $90 billion over 10 years if they go through with this plan, if House Republicans go through with this plan to cut the IRS's budget in order to give emergency aid to Israel. And Mike Johnson was asked about this because, Republicans, they're very concerned about the deficit.
Again,
and
hard finger-breaking air quotes.
Yeah, they don't want to increase it, certainly. They're all about ensuring that whatever they do does not increase the deficit.
Yeah.
Be careful, everybody be careful.
Were you surprised by the CBO score, sir?
Not surprised at all. Only in Washington, when you cut spending, do they call it
Are you alarmed
an
by the
increase in the
CBO
deficit.
score?
Only in Washington, if you cut spending, does it increase the deficit? The reason that is because the IRS and the enforcement arm of the IRS, the auditors, the people who go through and make sure people are paying what they are, what the government is owed, what they are due in taxes. If you cut the funding of that, then they're not able to go through and enforce people to pay the taxes they owe, and the budget is impacted. You dumb shit.
Well, and interestingly enough, and I bet this is not connected at all. I bet there's no connection here, but I just want to throw it out there.
I get the idea that something that you're going to say is absolutely connected.
I mean, I don't know, but a month ago, the IRS said that they were going to start pursuing 1,600 billionaires who owe at least $250,000 each in overdue taxes.
Wow.
And that was going to be their priority in terms of revenue. And now it's like, hey, we need to cut the IRS because we actually don't want them to do that.
It's not, they're not even sly about it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we're going to cut the IRS. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, they're going after our voter base. They're going after rich people.
Yeah. So, Mike Johnson, terrible person to have in a position of power, dangerous person to have in a position of power.
Let me drop the disclaimer and then I will add something.
The views and opinions of Jesse Dollemore are solely those of Jesse Dollemore and do not reflect the views and opinions of Brittany Page, who is a far superior person and much more measured and reasonable in her views and analysis.
You put a qualifier on there that he is a terrible person to have in a position of power. I would say he's a terrible person. Boop. Period.
I don't disagree with that. You don't need a disclaimer for that. I mean, it's very clear. But particularly being in a position of power is dangerous.
Without a doubt.
And it's scary. And I think people were saying, I'm afraid for Jim Jordan to be in a position of power. I think you should be afraid for anyone who has views like this to be Speaker of the House. And remember that every single House Republican voted for this man.
Yeah, listen. He's a young Earth creationist. We didn't really cover that, but he believes the Earth is fewer than 10,000 years old, which by virtue of that fact would mean he believes that human beings and dinosaurs coexisted. He thinks the Flintstones is a fucking documentary, not a cartoon. He also questions the existence of gays or whether they should exist. He wants to adhere to an 18th century, a 1700s version of morality and duty and values. This is, without a doubt, and it's not just an invective, he's a bad guy. He's a terrible person, or at the most charitable explanation, he's stupid. So I don't want a terrible person being Speaker of the House, and I don't want a stupid person being Speaker of the House, and by virtue of that, not qualified.
Yeah. So remember who Mike Johnson is as we move through into election season. Remember that Republicans put him into a position of power, and remember who the Republican Party is.
Yeah. We are going to leave you there. We would ask for your communication and your questions and your comments to help us move the conversation forward, as we like to do on an episode-by-episode basis. You can call 657-464-7609 and leave a brief, fewer than 3-minute voicemail. Google Voice will cut you off. Don't call back. Just leave it at that. Or you can email idoubtit@dollemore.com. Once again, we would encourage you, we would invite you to join the Patreon family, help produce this content on an episode-by-episode basis. You can do so by going to patreon.com/idoubtitpodcast and help support there.
I think also, we usually end our interviews talking about what's the most recent thing our guest has changed their mind about.
Mm-hmm.
And just to throw it out there real quick, since you said don't keep calling and leaving multiple voicemails, we've started blocking people.
Oh, we have done that.
And I think that that's something we've changed our mind about, that we're just not going to tolerate certain things. And spamming the box of like seriously 30 calls and like messages just left repeatedly. We can't have it.
Well, it just clouds it disables us from being able to get to the people who want to have earnest communication.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be fucking around, you will get blocked.
Absolutely.
And unapologetically.
Yeah, so don't even try it.
Yeah. Don't even try it. You heard it there. We're going to leave you there. We love you. We appreciate you very much. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time on 892. We're almost to 900 episodes.
Wow.
We'll see you next time. For Brittany Page, I'm Jesse Dollemore, and this has been I Doubt.